Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name's Arthur Hedge. I'm the president and co-founder of Castle Ventures Corporation. And we're in the data protection business. We are a cybersecurity consulting company based in the New York area in the United States. And we help our clients protect their data. And one of the key components of that effort is to get visibility into your data stores. If you don't have that visibility, it's very hard to protect the data that's valuable to you. And with the move to Microsoft 365 and people putting so much information into the cloud, it's critical that we get visibility into that data because we can't protect it if we can't see it. And that's one of the reasons that we partner with Rencore, because it provides great visibility into the Microsoft 365 environment so that we're able to manage, protect, and optimize the use of the Microsoft 365 solution. And some of the use cases that are important to us, one of our key tenets in terms of how we help our clients protect their data is that we get the business people involved in that effort. They know the best about who should have access to their data, who should be doing what with that data. And if you want to be successful at that, you need to provide visibility into who owns information in your data stores. And Rencore, it's an underlying component of how they present their data that you can see who owns the different resources in the Microsoft 365 environment from a single pane of glass, which is one of the things that we love about the solution. In addition, there are things like managing external access, right? If we're going to protect our data, we don't want it going outside the organization. We want to be able to see who's sharing that data, both within the organization and outside the organization. We want a process to offboard users, one of the most dangerous vectors that people go in and attack organizations is by taking over, dormant accounts that are still active. And a lot of this information is available in the Microsoft 365 world, but you've got, tens of admin centers that you have to crawl through to get the information that you need to do your job. So Rencore provides a single pane of glass that makes it easy for us to understand what's going on inside our clients' unstructured data stores and gives us the visibility that we need to help them protect their data. And finally, because of all of this information that you have, you can actually, get a return on investment through this visibility by optimizing the cost, reducing licenses that are no longer used when people leave, or making sure that you're doing your things both from an effectiveness standpoint as well as a cost efficiency perspective. So Rencore provides lots of capabilities in a single pane of glass, which is one of the reasons that we partner with them. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Charles, who will give you a demonstration of how the tool provides answers to some of the key questions that we need to help our clients protect and manage their data.
Okay, thanks, Arthur. Okay, so what I'd like to do here is perhaps just go back a little bit and to kind of look at why we're talking about a single platform in the first instance. Why is this conversation happening? Why is it required? And perhaps one of the things that we can do is go back slightly to where this kind of all started. And this was kind of when, 25 years ago, or roughly around there, just to set the stage here, it all partly started with a kind of paradigm shift, a new way of thinking. And this was championed by Jack Welch, who was the CEO of General Electric, almost 25 years. And it was about this boundaryless organizations. So working across organizational boundaries, the advocacy for breaking down silos, to have these boundaryless organizations. And the way that this was going to be done was basically through technology. So bringing people together across levels, across functions, across geographies, geographies to solve problems and make decisions in real time. So this trend was already in place, momentum on it and uptake was on an upward trajectory. Now, if we fast forward to today, and you have a look at how our communication technologies have vastly improved, that boundary-less organization should some way be the de facto reality for most companies. But the reality is that it's not quite the case. And lots of companies are still very siloed, have fragmented processes and cultures, and lack the insight that is required for that to be basically the reality. Now, there's been a more recent shift that has kind of accelerated that, and it's basically forced the hand of a trend that was already in place, and that's basically, unfortunately, COVID-19. And what we've seen that it's been the recent catalyst for this growth, and it's basically the need to facilitate remote working. This has basically brought that roadmap forward on a trend that was already kind of happening. And what we've seen, particularly because of COVID, has been phenomenal growth in the adoption of cloud technologies. And just to give you an example on, how phenomenal that has been and just how crazy that has gotten, we can just look at the statistics from the Teams explosion that has happened. So, for instance, Microsoft added 95 million users to Teams in 2020. It was one of the fastest growing apps of the pandemic. It currently has 250 million daily active users, and that's up from 13 million in 2019. And then from March to June 2020, Microsoft Teams noticed a 894% growth. So that's quite a phenomenal uptake that we're talking about there. And this is also meant for organizations basically moving to the cloud. Cloud computing has basically grown in popularity. Its flexibility, the allure and promise for organizations on everything from saving time and money to improving agility, and scalability. So this mentality of having this old traditional way of having a central HQ, which all your employees could gather, having the infrastructure stored locally, and basically IT employees on hand to support and manage potential issues, and having on-premise software, it doesn't work for this kind of recent COVID-fueled paradigm shift that we are witnessing. So it requires flexibility, it requires scalability and agility that the cloud has to offer in order to cope with this shift that we're kind of seeing. And even for highly regulated businesses and highly regulated industries where security concerns remains sometimes the number one barrier to cloud computing, the move hasn't been put off entirely or cannot be put off in perpetuity, and we're beginning to see that. And even there we have started to see a change or workarounds such as private clouds, for instance, that illustrate how strong this push is. So what this basically means as well for the majority of organizations is Microsoft 365. That's what they have been adopting. And Microsoft 365, basically a runaway success. It offers the versatility, the scalability, and ever evolving kind of toolkit. It's constantly changing on offer. It's made it one of the most leading cloud technology providers. It's a great toolbox of services that necessitates the means of collaboration and productivity. But on the other hand, this success, it's come with its own challenges, some of which are caused by, for example, the frantic growth in Teams, which I mentioned previously, with organizations now basically asking themselves, how on earth do I manage this uncontrolled sprawl that I've unleashed basically through rapid adoption of Teams, for example. And so what we have here is various M365 challenges. So the tools are very much siloed, which is one of the problems that you have with Microsoft. If you want to know what's happening within Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, or if you want to know what's happening within Power Platform and so on, you have to go to those various admin centers. You have to go to the Teams admin center, you have to go to the Power Platform admin center, and so on and so forth. What's required is a more integrated view, a way of gaining insights into this. For instance, what is happening in combination with your Azure AD across the tenant. And we've seen various ways in which organizations have attempted to achieve this, very manual, time-consuming ways in which organizations have tried to achieve this. If you have a team, for instance, and you want to know if they are disabled owners, they would have to look at various admin portals or write some scripts themselves, then get a list of the teams and their owners, then find the info in Azure AD. This is all scripting, putting it into Excel, etc. This is a lot of time and effort that is required to put that into place. But these attempts that organizations try to remedy some of these challenges, such as costs, external user management, some of the ones that Arthur mentioned, user offboarding, declutter, operation adoption, and we'll have a look at these in the demo, certainly, which is going to come, has led to a call for a tool-based approach to Microsoft 365 governance. In November last year, I was actually at the recent collaboration summit, and it was very clear that governance was a huge topic. You had a whole range of sponsors there who were going, talking about Power Platform governance, provisioning governance, and of course, many tools there, but none of which cover the spectrum of the M365 tools to the extent and breadth that Rencore does. So if we just go to kind of what I experienced at the European Collaboration Summit, which people throwing the term governance around, I found that it was a very loose term, if I'm to be honest. I found it thrown away everywhere, along with risk and compliance, GRC. It was being thrown around everywhere. Now, I find it quite easy to pinpoint what risk and compliance could possibly be. However, governance is a rather vague or very broadly applied term. And they're very, from the experience I've had with dealing with clients, there are a number of reasons for that. It's just governance varies from one organization to the next. It varies greatly. On one end of the scale, we have organizations, for instance, who want to operate an evergreen IT strategy, where the users are always on the latest version, up to date, the tools are fully opened and accessible, for the combination of people, processes, and technology that are used to deliver optimal results. This encourages adoption, with users deciding which tools they can use for various activities to be more productive and efficient. And maybe one of the reasons that you find that a good idea to take that approach towards governance is to basically stop people from reverting to shadow IT, so that they can facilitate what they need to make their lives easier and subscribe basically to applications and services without explicit IT department approval, which is a situation that can have, unfortunately, devastating consequences. And to mitigate that kind of feeling of uncertainty, what's happening within the tenant once you've opened it up, what you want to do is to have a tool in place to make sure that you are still compliant and that security is not being compromised. And then on the other end of the scale, you can have an organization that has, for instance, a zero trust IT policy, and they've locked everything down, and they could have good reason for taking that side of the scale as well. They're highly sensitive and security conscious, and you have to, ensure users both inside and outside the corporate network are deemed trustworthy. So you would have checks in place to ensure that data is not being shared externally, that external guests on your tenant are removed as swiftly as possible once their project is over, and so on. And this is where Rencore Governance comes in. It's an all-in-one platform, and it doesn't matter where you sit on that scale, whether you're, completely open things up, or whether you're a zero trust IT governance policy, and it doesn't matter what services you're using, Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, the Power Platform, etc. It's an all-in-one platform which allows you to choose that. Just before I go into the demo, just to kind of emphasize why the need for a single platform. M365 governance is basically an organizational-wide topic. There are many stakeholders involved, and a lot of the times with the clients that I've been dealing with, it typically starts with the IT admin team. However, we see the ball rolling after that. They use Rencore Governance, IT security gets involved, the service desk, infrastructure, procurement team, architect support, all being drawn in. And this is certainly the case with Rencore Governance. It's organizational wide, and you can use it organizational wide. It addresses the problems that many people within an organization would have a problem with, and it spans multiple teams, and these teams work together to figure out their processes. But Rencore Governance also creates the chance for improved processes, or the definition of them from scratch. And basically visibility is one of the key issues here. how a tool-based approach to governance gives the visibility required to basically open the dialogue for organizations to make educated, data-driven decisions on their Microsoft 365 strategies and priorities moving forward. So it all starts with knowing, discovery and analysis, visibility and insights, just knowing what it is that you have. Without this, issues are often just found by chance, and IT cannot proactively deliver the services that are required. So governance is more than just it encompasses a range of things. It's platform visibility, monitoring health, change management, digital transformation. But one of the most important things, it's addressing your business needs and interpreting your Microsoft 365 strategy and making the most out of your Microsoft 365 investment with regards, again, to some of the things which Arthur mentioned, such as lifecycle management, user offboarding, cost optimization, adoption, external access, compliance and security, and so on. Now let's switch to the demo and just show you what we mean by some of those use cases that I've gone there. So let's go to the Rencore Governance demo. So I've opened up the tool, and I land here within my dashboards page. Now the way that I'll go through the tool is perhaps the same way in which we see a lot of organizations use it. I'll go through the checks, the automations, and then I'll come through the dashboards and the inventory towards the end. Particularly with the dashboards, I'll just show you an overview here of some of the use cases that I mentioned here, such as external access, user offboarding, operations, security, inventory. But I think to understand what makes up those use cases, we need to have an understanding of what checks are in place. And all this terminology will make sense in a moment. But while I'm in the dashboards, I'll just basically scroll through the dashboards to show what it is that we're covering. So we've got the Office 365 groups, we've got Teams, we've got Power Automate, we've got Power Apps, we've got SharePoint inventory, SharePoint governance that we do, OneDrive governance that we do, Exchange governance that we do, Yammer, and Azure AD governance that we do. So we've got those 10 services that we govern at the moment, which is more than a lot of the competition out there has. But the goal here is to be the go-to tool when it comes to Microsoft 365 governance, that we have you covered in this one platform. You don't want to be in a position where basically you have to make a choice from the beginning of what tools you want to use. Oh, I got to go to so on and so on to get my Power Automate governance into place. I got to go to this guy to get my Teams and SharePoint governance. No, we want a single platform where you can do this from, and that's the goal of the Rencore Governance Tool. Now, I'm sure you may have noticed that there are a couple of things that are missing there, but we do have a roadmap which we make publicly available, and you can check on this roadmap to see what is coming up here. And I know, for instance, what maybe a lot of you would have been looking for would be Azure. That is coming. It's planned for the end of this quarter, actually. That will be Azure, which is coming up. Permissions report is another one which is popularly requested. That's planned for our second quarter. So with this roadmap here, you can see what's on the horizon and what's in development, and a lot to come with the automations, and I'll explain that in the demo as well once we arrive there. Okay, back to this governance tool. So how would you use Rencore Governance to put your first governance policy, governance rule into place? So let's go to checks, and as you may have noticed there, I use the word governance checks on policies and rules. Same with governance. Different organizations would use different terminologies, but we mean the same thing here when we say governance checks. And so here you can see some of the governance checks that are running here within my demo data, which I'm demoing today. Unused sites, disabled user accounts with assigned licenses, flows requiring a premium license, externally shared files. You can see the severity of these ones which are running here, and what category they fall into. But back to the question which I first asked was, okay, so how do I use this tool to put in my first governance policy or check? Sorry. So you could simply go to add check, and this would take you to a checks template library. And within this template library, we've got a library of the most significant governance checks here. And how do we know what's significant? We didn't just dictate the market. We didn't go, okay, so what is it we think that people are doing. We actually gave the tool out to people and we said, hey, give us feedback. And we're still consistently taking feedback on what people are doing out there in the real world. What do they want to see within this library? And we take this feedback, we go through the data and we're like, okay, these are the most requested checks. Actually, these are the ones that make the most sense. And if you could go through these checks here, so here you can see, for instance, admin accounts with an Office 365 E3 license assigned, external users, global administrators without MFA. And here you can see we give you an idea on what categories they fall in and the severity. So global administrators without MFA, that's a security issue, and that's of high severity. Groups with external owners, inactive external users, these are all your Office 365 groups checks. Then we've got your teams checks here, inactive teams, new teams. You're looking at adoption with new teams being created, teams that are reaching the limit, just taking control of that sprawl, that declutter that can happen with your environment. Teams with less than 2 owners, following Microsoft's best practices. Teams with many owners, teams with very few owners. And then we come to your Power Automate checks, complex flows. So we've got this library of default checks that you can choose from to make them suit your business needs. Now, it may be that what's in the library here is similar to what you require, but perhaps not quite. For instance, maybe complex flows. If you want to go into that, maybe you think complex flows, action counts of 20, that's nothing. Maybe you want to up them, and you can easily do that. You can take what's in the library and you can up that. So you can take what's in the library and adjust it. These are filled with default numbers, default settings that we have incorporated into each one of these checks, but you can use what's in the library if it seems to match what you want. So for instance, here we've got unused sites. You could use this template. So here you're looking at last used is more than equal to 90 days. Maybe you want to change that to, no, actually, I want to flag unused sites after a period of 180 days. You could just simply change that, click next, change it to unique wording because the default one has been used, 180 days, change it slightly there, 180 days, and click save. And what you've built there is basically save and enable is basically a unique check. So I've showed you 2 ways so far in which you can add the check. So use what's in the library, or use what's in the library and tweak it to your own specific business needs. Or the final one was maybe you've got a niche check which is not within the library, and you want to create your own custom check. So if I just think of one that I've come across recently, which was basically, I had a client who was looking for Power Apps, basically, with a disabled owner account. So Power Apps with a disabled owner account, that's a unique check. You won't find it within the library. There could be a specific reason that you're looking for that one, but how would you go and build that out? So you want to report a violation. For there, you scroll through until you come to Power Apps Canvas there, and then you want to basically add a related object to that. So you add the related object, and what is it that you're looking for? You're looking for any user. There we go. And then from that, you want to add the filter conditions. Any user with account enabled is not true, is false. And so that's how you would build that specific check out. Power Apps with a disabled owner account. Powers Canvas, any users account enabled is false. So take some logic, take some getting used to, but there's a world of checks out there that you can build just using that simple logic. So this is all very good to have this information that you've got there, much better than what I said previously during that intro of people trying to attempt to do this manually. So here, if I go for teams with many users, for instance, and I go into global marketing, you can see very useful information. You can see the properties here, display name, created date. You can see the related objects here, the group, the members, the owners, sensitivity label, teams channels, and you can see the checks that global marketing has passed or failed. So I came out from the check with teams with many users, so they obviously failed that one. Teams that use forbidden misleading words, they obviously failed that one, so on and so forth. Well, what would be the next bit would be if I could do something with this data. It's all very well and good having it, and that is when the next step comes in, and that's basically automations. So I'm here with teams of many users, and now I want to add automation. I simply go to add automation, and it comes to this automation builder. So here it's set to the trigger is on check violation, and I've come out of the check teams with many users. Now it doesn't have to be on check violation. You may decide that on check, let me just first explain what check violation means. It means every time that a scan is run and it comes across this violation, teams with many users, every time it comes across that, it's going to trigger the automation that you're about to build now, but it doesn't have to be that way. You could, for instance, choose to do it on schedule. And what that would mean was, well, if you want to annoy everybody on a Friday, for instance, you could build it out that way, that these automations that you're building out are only scheduled to go out on Friday rather than every time that scan is run, and that's likely to be on a daily basis, that this would be triggering that automation. Maybe you want to do it once a week, for instance. So that's how you could build this out. And then you go to next. And this is where you're adding the actions of what it is that should happen, that should take place here. So the first step could be maybe you want to send an email. So you'd add that as the first step. You're sending an email. You'd use this dynamic data. So it's going to the team's owners because of the check that I came off of. Who it's going to, the user email, so on and so forth. Pull in this dynamic data and you'd write the body there, hey, so on and so forth. You violated this check, and that would be the first email that you would send out. And I've seen this being used in a number of inventive ways, actually, by organizations out there. There was one organization that was kind of enforcing governance, but also reinforcing it as well. And what I mean by that is that the way that they set this out was, for instance, sending out an email once that check is violated, rather than just saying, hey, you violated that check, could you please fix it, or we're going to take an action or something like that. They'd say, oh, by the way, dear user, if you click on this, they'd have, for instance, in the body, maybe a blog or a link to a website or a link to a YouTube channel saying, look at that if you want to learn how to avoid doing that incorrectly in the future, which kind of streamlines the workforce, which was just one clever way in which I thought this could be used by enforcing governance and reinforcing again. But anyway, back to the demo here. So the first step, you want to send an email. But as we know, people ignore email notifications left, right, and center. So you want to add a step. So if that is ignored, what's going to happen next? So maybe after a delay of perhaps 2 weeks, you could add an action. And maybe this time you send a message to a Teams channel and you'd add that action. And if that's ignored, then you'd maybe go now and send an HTTP request to take an affirmative action. Now, just to give you a little bit of an insight into what's going to be coming up with Rencore Governance, and hopefully towards the end of this quarter, we presumed the market slightly incorrectly. We didn't think people out there would want a tool that kind of takes those affirmative steps, such as revoking access, adding people to groups, archiving, deleting things. But from the feedback that we've had, it's clear that people want that and they want us to manage it for them. So if you saw on the roadmap here, there are a lot more actions that are going to be coming here with the automations. They are on our roadmap, due to be released at the end of this quarter, and you'd be able to just click on those and choose them. But as you can see, you can do quite a lot here: archiving or unarchiving a team, send message to a Teams channel. And one thing that I will show you, which is also going to be expanding with the automations here, is this automation library. So as you can see, in the checks, we had a full library of checks that you could choose from. It's going to be the same with automation, so that you don't always have to revert to building your own custom automations. You just want to choose one that's within the library and set it up, maybe tweaking it slightly, the same way that you would with our checks. And as you can see, there are some which are here within this template library, and we are going to be expanding this template library. So disable inactive external users accounts, archive unused teams, mark teams with external users, set teams to private by default, remind OneDrive owners of externally shared files, warn OneDrive owners if their OneDrive reaches storage limit. And I'll go into one just so you can see it. This has already been set up for you. So it's on check violation. So every time that scan is run, and it's in public teams. And then the next Here you can see it's already been set up for you. So it's setting the visibility of a group to private, and it's got the email already there set up for you. Dear, it'll pull in the first name, the last name. You're the owner of the Microsoft Teams. This visibility of this team is currently set to public. We're setting it to private, basically, is what the email is going to be saying. So you can just choose that template there, which is within the automations, to freely basically use. And then going out of that and back to where we started, which was the dashboards. So, and the use cases which basically Arthur was describing in the beginning there. So what we see a lot of people using dashboards for, and I'll show you this in a second, is for reporting purposes. So for instance, if you want to, if the Teams admin wants to know what's happening within Teams, you could just simply share the Teams dashboard with them. These are just the services, the Microsoft 365, the Teams, the Power Automate, the Power Apps. But then we've got default dashboards, which are based on the use cases that we mentioned earlier, for instance. So let's go into one of them, for instance. So costs. So here it is. So finding out, for instances, various things that are going to impact costs. So for instance, licenses that are still assigned to a disabled user accounts, which actually happens quite often, or inactive licenses or double licensing, which also happens quite frequently. For instance, someone has an E3 license, and then within the organization, they change roles, and an E5 license, for instance, is required for that particular role. This is assigned and the E3 is not revoked. So what happens? It stays there. And now imagine this at scale. Or you could have licenses that are assigned to mailboxes. That also happens quite frequently. So this is all, things that would impact costs. Some of the things that could also would be spiraling storage. So we can also look at SharePoint and OneDrive storage capacity and when that limit is reached. These are all things that are going to be impacting those costs. And then again, here, what things that are going to be impacting costs. Flows or Power Apps, basically, that make use of premium connectors. Perhaps rolled out to people who do not quite have full grasp, on how to build flows or Power Apps with premium connectors. But they just go ahead and do it, and they need to be paid for. But again, this is the thing of where people were just experimenting and trying to adopt new technologies. You want to encourage that. You certainly do. You want them to if you could build Power Apps and these things, it certainly helps. But you want to stay in control, that cost doesn't spiral out of control, that these are not just being built. It's all racking up unnecessary hidden costs. So that's one of the dashboards that we have there on the use cases. Another one that we have, it would be the external access dashboard. So here we have, you want to get a better understanding and peace of mind of who are the guests in my tenant. In Teams and SharePoint, etc. We need certainly external guests for collaboration purposes for projects, but then we have a hard time figuring out when they can revoke access again. So this is where you can use this external access dashboard to gain insights into that. And I had a client the other day, actually, just to share the story, who was convinced that nothing was being shared externally. A potential client, rather, at the time, was being shared externally, and they actually procured quite an expensive tool for that purpose of collaborating externally. So I said, okay, fine, let's run a POC of the Rencore Governance Tool and see what happens. It turned out things were being shared externally, and these were being shared by the global administrators. So again, this is things that would, give you that peace of mind that such things like that aren't basically happening. So again, here, external users with pending acceptance, external users, groups with external users. And then let's go to another one, which is popular, just to give you an idea on what's happening here, user offboarding. So when somebody's leaving your organization, you want to know what, so let's, what resources they had. So groups with disabled user accounts, that's one of the checks here. But let's say, let's go into a specific user, disabled user accounts, if we go into a specific user there. So let's say, for instance, Adele Vance leaves the organization. You want to make sure Advance has a smoother transition as possible, leaving the organization, or rather the organization has a smoother transition as possible, getting rid of Advance. So you want to know the related objects. You want to know what licenses Advance had, so those could be reassigned. You want to know if the, what group there were memberships of, if they owed any flows, so it doesn't impact business continuity, so on and so forth. And you could set up an automation, trigger an automation to assign that, for example, to Advance's manager if required. And then finally, one of the things, so some of the use cases there, so you can see, those dashboards there cover, some pretty important use cases. I didn't go through all of them, but I think we're running out of time here. But as you can see, things such as external access, user offboarding, operation security, inventory, declutter, deprecation, so on and so forth. And then one of the things as well, which is commonly done with the dashboards, is that these are used for reporting purposes. So if I want to create a dashboard, let's say management has come to me and they've said, well, we want to receive a report on, a weekly basis of the things that we are interested in. And you want to, okay, I want to create a dashboard now for management. You would create a blank dashboard for them. As you can see, I clicked on the blank dashboard, and then you would save it. And now I've got a blank dashboard with nothing in it. And I want to fill it with things that could be of interest or what management is basically required from me. They want to know the status of the licenses. Okay, you could add that to the management dashboard you've just created. If they want to know about, groups with external owners, you could add that to the management dashboard you've just created. So on and so forth. I'm just randomly clicking here, but you get the idea. I'm building up a unique if they want to know about teams with very few owners, you could add it to the management dashboard that I've just created there. I'm building up a unique dashboard here for the management. And if you don't find the tile you're looking for, you can always go and create your own custom tile. Highly versatile solution. You can always customize it, tweak it to suit your own business needs. And here's the management dashboard that I've just created with the 3 random tiles that I clicked on there. And you can share this dashboard. Yes, this is a recurring email. And you want to write down there who it's going to. Okay, they want to receive it on a weekly basis, what time it should go out to them, and you can attach the full PDF report, and that would be sent out to them, for an example, as a report on a weekly basis. And then the final part here, so we've done checks, we've done automation, we've done dashboards, and now we go to inventory. So this is useful in the fact that you don't have to go to dozens of admin centers to get all this data. It's collected here all in one place. But one of the things which is helpful is to make sense of the inventory data here. So you can use this with segments, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So here I've got users, which is the total number of users in tenant. But what you want to know is maybe external users. So there we go. That's a segment which is being built in here. Users, your external users. So of the 298 for external. Now that's useful information to have. But let's drill further down. So let's go into, I don't know, SharePoint files, for instance. Which is all useful, but now you want to add a specific segment to your SharePoint files. What is it you want to know about your SharePoint files? So add the filter there, and basically maybe file extension contains. Maybe you want to sort it out into what your JPEGs, your PDFs, or your docx's contains, and then you could just simply put PDF there, and then next to the visualization. And then next, basically give it a name, which is the PDF segment. And you click Save, and that's it. You've created a new segment. If I go back into that inventory data there, and I'm going now to SharePoint files, you can see now I have 31 PDFs within the SharePoint files there. Again, that is better data to have than just SharePoint files as a whole. If you want to make a little bit more sense of it, break it down, use those segments, then your PDF segment, and you can do it down the list here, so on and so forth, adding segments where you require that to be added. So that covers the inventory. And then finally, the last thing I'd like to touch upon is this concept of role management. So if I basically go to users and roles, you could use this for a number of different reasons. You can invite users. Now, I say a number of different reasons. It could be, for instance, maybe you're a large organization and you have external people who are coming in. You'd like to give them access to Rencore Governance so they can use Rencore Governance to facilitate the work that they're doing, to give them the visibility on the tenant that you now have. That could be one way in which you want to have this role management, or it could be you're a consultant and you're using this tool for a number of different organizations, and one of them is quite IT savvy, and they're saying, hey, I want to gain insight into what's happening with my tenant, and then you could invite them in so that client of yours can gain insight into the tenant. So a number of different ways in which this role management way can be used that could be useful for. So you can invite a user here, for instance, put in their email address, and you can accept, the role which they have. So, for instance, owner, reader, admin, contributor. The owner role can do everything. They have the most permissions. The reader role can read only, and we'll look at those permissions in a second. And then you can select the team that they have access to. So maybe it's just the team's admin. You don't want to bog them down with everything else that's happening within the tenant. So you just want to grant them access to the teams. You can do so. But maybe you want to get even more granular than that. And this is where you can go to roles. And here you can see the owner roles has 43 permissions, and you can view that role and you can view all the permissions. They can do everything: read dashboard, create dashboard, edit dashboard, delete dashboard, so on and so forth. And the reader has 4 permissions. And here you can see you can view the role here. You can basically just read, and read. So you've got an external contractor who's coming into the work for the organization, and you want to, none of these roles fit that particular guy, so you want to create a unique role, external guy who's coming to work for you. And then here you can select the permissions on a more granular level into what it is that role does. So if you want them to read dashboard, create dashboard, edit dashboard, oh no, maybe you don't want them to delete anything within Rencore Governance. Same with inventory check. So you can get a little bit more granular and define that specific role for that particular external contractor, as an example, who you may be inviting to use the tool. So that covers, Rencore Governance. I mean, it is a vast tool, and just a couple of things to mention. I mean, there could be some people who are saying, well, we don't use all the services within Microsoft 365. I mean, we're only using SharePoint Teams, but you guys are doing Yammer, etc. But that's part of the, taking that headache away from the beginning, as I mentioned earlier. It's like it's one platform. You don't have to choose, that first governance step of choosing, analyzing what it is that you're using and what tools you need for that. It's a single platform. And we are going to eventually, probably by the end of the second quarter, have all the Microsoft 365 services covered by this tool. So that covers the demo of the Rencore Governance Tool. Were there any questions that came up?
Yes, there were quite a couple.
Yeah.
So if we go, let's start with, this one is from Maya. Question is, how do you succeed with the challenge of getting a deep insight on the data movement without being non-compliant with the data protection regulations for your employee usage data? Quite a long one.
I think quite a long one, yeah.
I think it basically revolves around, so is the data that you're looking at in Rencore Governance non-compliant to what you're allowed to look at in terms of usage data?
I'll try and answer the question. So is Rencore Governance, for instance, GDPR compliant? It is. And the data that we gather from the tenant, if it's anonymized, for instance, at the tenant level, so you can have control of that. It will stay anonymized for us when we do gather that data. But Arthur, are you able to add anything to that? I don't know if I fully understood the question correctly, but
Arthur actually had to step off. He had a client emergency that just came up.
Right, okay.
Join when he can.
All right. Well, then in that case, I'll make it. Because I'm not too sure about in that respect. What I'll do is I'll make a note of these questions, and perhaps TS, what do you think? They can be sent out for any that can't be answered. Be sent out with the recording of this. Okay, perfect. I'll look into that one. Yeah. I'll look into that one. Okay.
Alrighty. Another question from Hussein is, permissions report will be very beneficial. I think there is something like a permissions report, and I think we already touched on that, right?
Not probably to what they're referring to. This is it's been requested, yes, quite frequently, and this is something which is planned. And so here, as I said, this is on the roadmap. It's planned for the second quarter of 2022. So this feature will provide the ability to create a report which contains information with objects of specific users groups has been granted access. So SharePoint sites, SharePoint webs, libraries. It is on the roadmap. We are aware it's a popular request, and it is coming. Yes.
Perfect. Another question is, can you customize the checks library?
Can you customize the checks library? So in other words, can you turn off the checks? Well, yes, it's fully customizable, basically. So when you at the moment, and we may change this actually in the future. At the moment, when you sign up your tenant, you have these default checks which automatically run there. What we may do in the future is that we don't have any, and you have to kind of select the checks that you want to put in. But at the moment, you can deselect any of the checks which are within the library. So if I go there, for instance, you can deselect any of these checks which are within the library, create your own custom checks. It's fully customizable, yes.
All right. One more question from Stefan. How are all these data collected, and in which context do the checks run? Via an app registration or an admin user or is an admin user required?
So for the okay, so when you're connecting up the tenant, you need global admin rights. For the Power Platform, you need an admin user. And sorry, what was the first bit of the question?
How's the data collected, and which context do
via
those checks
Graph
run?
API.
Yeah,
via Graph API. Yeah, and then.
So it's which context do the checks run? So I think it is a kind of rights thing. So yeah, admin user required, global admin, and so on. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, so global admin required specifically to run on the Power Platform. You need admin user. That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. One last that I got here. What's the interval for the scan for your violations, and can I configure it?
No, you can't configure it because then obviously we would be throttled by Microsoft. So yeah, in order to avoid that, we do full and incremental scans. So obviously, when you first connect up the tenant, we do a full scan, and that would basically scan everything within the tenant. It's a full scan, and we would run a full scan not as regularly as the regular then incremental scans that would happen after your full scans, which is basically your full scan draws a baseline, and then we're checking for changes after that, and then after a long period of time, we'd do another full scan. No, you cannot change that. The way in which we would describe it is basically continuous scanning. So once one scan is finished, the next scan would kick in. And for most of the services there, you would get this data on a daily basis. It would be up to date. We haven't come across an environment where that hasn't been the case. Apart from SharePoint, because SharePoint we have to crawl through the data, and that takes a little bit of time. So with SharePoint particularly, you may get, for instance, a 1 week, for instance, for to crawl through the data. I think that answers the question. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. So I think that pretty much that answers the last question in the pipeline. So no more in the Q&A.
All right, perfect. Then I guess that wraps up the webinar. It's been a pleasure, everybody, to having you here. And yeah, if there are any further questions, or you wanted to learn more or get a personal demo of the Rencore Governance tool, we will send you the details on how to do that with the follow-up with the recording which we're going to send out to everybody that did register for this. And you can take that on with Rencore directly or with our partners, Castle Ventures, Arthur and the team there.